Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Malloy Industries Masterclass on brand narratives to attract talent and funding. The Malloy Industries Consulting Group helps growth stage companies build remote consulting teams so they can reclaim their time while scaling from 2 million to 20 million in revenue. And our clients work with over 120 vetted, trustworthy fractional executives like Anna and Ben, who are joining us today to help achieve their business objectives and reach investor milestones. And so I'll drop my email in the chat in case anybody wants to follow up. And we're really excited for today's masterclass because Anna and Ben are going to teach you about the timing, reasons, and impact for building a technology brand. And Anna and Ben are joining us from Wunderdogs, which is a brand and strategy consultancy to high-end or high-growth technology companies who've helped raise over $400 million in early-stage capital and create millions of dollars in value for both early and growth stage companies. So without any further ado, I pass it over to Anna and Ben. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, Peter. Going to be a good workshop with one-on-one today. So hopefully you get something out of it, and hopefully we see a few more people join. But yeah, before we kick off, just wanted to give you a quick introduction to myself, and Anna will do the same. So my name is Ben Paxman. I'm a senior brand strategist at Wunderdogs. I've worked in the sort of creative industry for 10, 12 years or so in various different sort of aspects and sectors, from sort of pure sort of marketing and advertising to brand design, and now more recently joining Wunderdogs to work with, as Mike mentioned, high growth companies and really sort of help shape their brand strategies. And so that's me. Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Bogdanova. I'm a senior copywriter at Wunderdogs. Just like Ben, I've been working in the creative industry for the past 10 years, and I have a wide range of experience from advertising, digital advertising, but lately for the past 6 years or so, I've been working with brand narratives for high growth companies, particularly in tech and deep tech. So my focus has been on like very complex products and making sure that their narratives are communicating their values to their customers. And that's what I've been doing for Wunderdogs lately through copywriting.
Great, thank you. Let me share my screen and we'll sort of kick off with things. Let me see if I can get this working. Okay, so hopefully that's working.
Yep, looks good.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, so I think, as Mike mentioned, I'll kind of give us a bit of intro onto Wunderdogs in a second, but what we wanted to discuss today was really how brands become brands, essentially, and then the role they play in helping high growth companies get the funding, hire talent, and make a real impact with their audience. And, you know, as we've written here, great brands are not an accident. They're built early and by design. But often the sort of storytelling aspect and branding are often misunderstood elements of how, you know, a great company gets built. So what we wanted to do today was sort of take you through some thoughts and approaches to how we build brands, and hopefully that gives you some insight and understanding and sort of inspiration around this. But I wanted to kick off with a little bit about us as an agency. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to change something here, just so I can see the slides on my screen as well. There we go. So yeah, just a quick intro to Wunderdogs. So we've actually about to celebrate our 5th birthday in the next couple of weeks. So we've been around for 5 years or so, and essentially Wunderdogs was created to serve high growth companies that have a great product, but often didn't have a story to tell to kind of let that product shine. So our founders, Dara and Olga, were early stage investors themselves. So they were seeing these companies with incredible stories and incredible products, but not having the right way to tell them. So what they built is an agency that really focuses on brand consultancy and digital. So we work all the way through from strategy through to visual identities, to copywriting, to web builds and digital output. In a range of sectors, we do a lot within sort of fintech, biotech, ag tech, kind of various different techs, I suppose. But yeah, we've kind of been doing this for a while now, and we kind of tend to sort of act as an extension of a client's marketing team, so helping fill those gaps when it comes to launching, growing, and scaling businesses. We're a pretty diverse bunch. We're a fully remote business, so you might notice I've got a British accent, and I'm based in Scotland. Anna is based in Greece, and we've got various different people all over the world. So we speak 11 languages. We've helped launch and scale products on 5 continents. As Mike mentioned, we've kind of helped companies raise over 400 million in capital, and we've got a really sort of good community that we talk to and leverage, and really help these companies tell their story and get their voice out there. We work with fans and teams to sort of build that end-to-end brand. As I said, we start right at the beginning, so that very foundational element of what it means to be your brand, what's your mission, your vision, all the way through to designing what a brand is. So that comes down to individual logos. It comes down to designing the look and feel, but also through a lot of the work that Anna does through tone and copy and balancing that visual and verbal aspect of the brand. And we kind of break it down into 4 different sort of key focus areas for us. So embracers, we've been owners and investors. So we've got a really strong background in knowing how brand works within the industries and sectors that we operate in. We've got a very lean approach. We work quickly and flexibly. So we're always looking to partner with people that have that ability to change quickly. And I think certainly in the early days of brands, that ability to move quickly and change is vital to sort of make sure that you are going in the right direction. And I'll come on to a little bit about that in a second. We're igniters, so inspired by the goals of those that we work with. I think we all get a lot of joy out of working with companies that are fast growing and have something interesting to say, and the possibility of making an impact on the world. And ultimately, we're collaborators, so we always push to build trusted relationships with startups, accelerators, create a community as well, because of course, we've got to be inspired by things as well, and bring new perspectives to branding and strategy and copy and so on. So we're always looking for inspiration elsewhere as well. So just wanted to cover off a little bit about ourselves. Of course, we're always open to chatting. So if you ever want to get in touch, then we've got an email address at the end of this deck where we can answer any more questions, or you can learn more about what we do. But I wanted to kick off with a sort of question, I guess, to ourselves, and a question that we have to sort of answer quite often when we work with new clients and new companies. And what is a brand, essentially? And I think a lot of people think of it as a logo or a color or a tagline, but obviously there's a lot more to it than that. But I think particularly when it comes to high growth companies, it's when do you start thinking about brand and how do you start doing it? I think the way I often see brand is, it's a person's gut feeling about a product, service, and organization, and that doesn't sort of capture every element of it. But the point is that brand is the emotional lever. So it's the chance to sort of turn that conversation with your audience into really, really meaningful connection. It's a tool to help communicate who you are, what you stand for. So the brand defines your positioning, your messaging, your personality, and your verbal and visual tone. And I think we all at Wunderdogs believe in building brands that last. We work with high growth companies that move quickly, but we want to make sure we give them a brand that's going to last, and it's going to take them through the stages of growth they're going to go through to become a global brand. So what we tend to do is build brands with flexibility within them, so that they can grow and flex as a business does. So I think with a brand as well, I think such an important aspect is consistency and making sure that that brand is communicated in the same way at every touch point. So whether you are having a one-to-one conversation with a potential customer, to publishing a thought piece, to putting something out on social media, your brand it creates the consistency. So it gives people an idea of what they expect. So if someone sees you on social media versus sees you on a face-to-face, that perception is the same. But I think getting to that point is tricky. Brands don't just appear out of nowhere; they take time to build and develop. But I think one thing that we always talk about is be really clear about what you're branding in the first place. And I think for anyone that's in that early stage of the journey, the focus should really be on those opportunities to define what you can offer and how do you answer the needs of customers. I always talk to a lot of people we work with around the sort of benefit versus value. Any company, any product has benefits, but it's what those benefits do or the value it brings to your customer that is the thing that's going to make a difference. It's the thing that's going to connect to them and encourage them to seek you out and understand that how your product can hold a place in their lives. When you start building a brand as well, I think it's important to be reflective of what you're trying to achieve. And, doesn't need to be altered early on if your product or service is still in a state of flux. So, get that product, get that sort of benefit right first before you then start to think about building a brand. Think of the brand as a filter. So it's the filter between you as a business and your product and your customer. And therefore it's the filter through how you communicate, what you communicate, and why it should matter to your customers. And I think that we build, as I said, from end to end all the way through, and that always starts with a vision. And that vision is critical in giving you focus. It's critical in understanding where you want to go. It kind of drives the choices on how you run your business and develop your brand. You always think about that vision in mind. So what is the goal in 10 years time? What do I want to achieve with this company? What do I want to achieve for the market? What do I want to achieve for customers? And then you can start to think about building those brand foundations. So if you've got your vision, the thing you want to achieve, that then starts to set the agenda for everything else. So yeah, I think, as I said, branding is the ultimate tool for communication, the visible and verbal link between your business and a customer. Quite often with early stage companies, the product is the focus, and quite rightly, because you've got to build it. But don't leave brand too late. As you start getting into fundraising, as you start connecting with advisors and partners and investors, your brand can be a really important tool that translates the value of your business in a very simple and easy to understand way. Which kind of takes me on to the sort of next part of this, is then sort of how do you define the brand if the product is not fully fleshed out? So, the product is only one part of your entire organization. There is obviously the team, there's your customer, there's the advisors, the investors, there's every other element of it. But even if your product is not fully finalized at this stage, you will have already identified an opportunity. So understood who your customer is and have a fairly decent idea of what you're hoping to achieve. So therefore, you can begin the process of building those brand foundations, the mission, the vision, being really clear on your value proposition. Focus on those internal aspects first, those elements that are going to guide your team and give them focus for building the business. And I think in the early stages of your brand, you will probably need to adjust and change as you adjust and change your proposition. So as you learn more about the audience, as the market changes, the technology changes, all those elements are things that will have an impact on how you think about brand. And at this point, you're going to be a relative unknown, so you've not yet built a reputation. So those changes and switches won't have a negative impact at this stage, because you don't yet have a lasting perception in the mind of your customers. So at the same time, it's important to start early. At the same time, don't feel tied to how you start or where. Be open to change and run with it if you see greater opportunities to pivot into something else. I've got some examples to share with you that some of the best brands that we know and in various different industries all started somewhere else. So I think a great example is Slack. So founders of Slack didn't start with Slack. They started with a multiplayer game called Glitch, and it was, I guess, a game that never really took off, never really kind of attracted the audience it was hoping to. But what the team realized at Slack was they'd been using or created an internal communication tool that allowed them to run Glitch, but develop it as well. So they listened to the market, they saw there was no opportunity, understood the limitations of their existing product, and therefore sort of looked at, well, what else can we turn this into? So the development of that internal messaging tool later became Slack. Another great example is Zipline, relatively early stage still, and if you've not heard of them, they're a business that creates drones that delivers vital medical supplies across various different African countries. But again, they started somewhere else, and I think these guys are very interesting that they started a completely different category, really focused on developing an iPhone controlled robotic pet. So we've gone from very much consumer focused to B2B. It's already a complete switch in terms of the world they operate in, but the technology of the sort of automation and the remote sort of working, the remote kind of technology meant that they had something there that they were able to utilize to change their approach and change their product. And really the story of this switch came from the CEO realizing that he wanted to have a bigger impact on the world, how to turn your product into something that was good for the world. So a pivot based on the founder's ambitions as opposed to listening to the market. So already the two examples there of different motivated to pivoting your business and therefore the brand. And the last one is OCTA, which is an identity management and security for SaaS applications. Originally started as Sashore, which was the monitoring and reporting tool for tracking the reliability of cloud services. So fairly closely related in sector, close related in service and product. But the team showed 100 people their proposition, Sashore, and people kept asking about identity and understanding, well, where's the identity aspect within this? So the company pivoted to answer the customer's needs. Another great example of changing how you approach your business, looking at how the brand can add value based on the fact that we're looking at what value we can add to customers. So at the time, they just weren't connecting, and therefore pivoted to create a new company and a new brand that showed, that kind of was answering the needs of customers there and then. So I think with those examples, it shows that, when you are thinking about brand, don't be held back by thinking this has to be the only way to do it. There's always other ways to think about it and other things that are kind of come in. And we work with a lot of companies that are on that cusp of, understanding they've got a proposition, they've got a product, and we're ready to move on to the next step. And often through the process we run through, the brand changes or the sort of elements of the brand will change as we go through it. I'll let Anna pick up here. Just talk about sort of narrative and how it can become a lead for pitching.
Sure, yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how your vision, mission, and value proposition is really going to become the narrative thread that links your pitch together and a very useful tool to draw investors in and potentially talent as well at early stages of your growth. So really, your fundamental vision is going to be what underpins your pitch. It gives you this assurance that you can show the world that you're operating in a space of need, and it gives potential investors confidence that you're putting your everything in it. But the key question for many people crafting their pitch is how exactly you can use these internal aspects of your brand to really make your brand shine outward. And there are certain narrative devices that you can employ to make your pitch stand out. And we can look at some examples of how that works in practice a little bit later on. But I just wanted to give some pointers of some narrative devices that you can use to really craft your pitch at an early stage. So the simplest and easiest trick that you can employ is really to keep it simple and straightforward. You want anybody within your target audiences, be it investors or potential teammates, to very quickly understand your business, the problem you're solving, and the scale of the opportunity. An important part of this is not hiding your point of view in technical language, jargon, and overwritten expressions. You really want to be straight and to the point. So you need to aim your pitch to be understood by anyone. And you really have to work hard to make your point understood in as few words as possible. Another important thing at this early stage would be to keep what you're saying relevant to the experiences that people have had in their lives so far. So if you're presenting something new or something that could potentially be disruptive to a sector, it's always good to link it to something that your audience already knows. So human behavior is basically something within human behavior we often call on prior experiences and our understanding of those prior experiences to make sense of the world around us. So if you're trying to communicate something complex or something new, it makes sense to link it to something that your audience already knows. And finally, a very big driver of your pitch at an early stage would be showing yourself, your experience, and your team, because many investors and many potential employees, they don't really buy into the idea of the product, they buy into the idea of you as a founder. So that's why the founders and the team are such an important part of the story of your brand. You can show how these people encapsulate your values, how they encapsulate your ideas, and you can use them as a representation of what your brand stands for. And then there are some principles that are really important for communicating about technical products specifically. And notably, when you're talking about technical products, you need to really surgically use any data that you have to tell stories, because data is a very powerful tool to tell an impactful story. But in many technical stories, there is just so much data that people are attempting to draw on that it dilutes the messaging rather than upholding it. So some carefully curated data points can be an elegant way to make benefits shine through with the least number of words, but you really need to make sure that you're curating those data points. And in technical products, especially, these data points will work as a powerful proof point to make your narrative more compelling. And then for technical products specifically, it's very important to show and not to tell. The best way to explain something is not necessarily with words, but with examples and images and some very evocative representations of what it is that you stand for. So if you want your audience to learn something new with a technical product, that's often the case. Don't just tell them the information factually, show them how it works by walking them through an example step by step, show them a case study, show them a living, breathing person who tells them how this thing works. And we can talk about how, some of these things, we can look at some examples of how these things all come to life, because I think looking at real life pitch decks is very useful to understand how these narrative devices really work. So the first one that I wanted to show is by a brand called April, and it's a B2B fertility platform that basically offers fertility benefits, that helps employers offer fertility benefits. So it's quite a complex B2B offering, because on the one hand, they're solving a very pertinent contemporary problem, but they need to show the employers that this is a problem worth solving. And when they get into their pitch, they start with their very, very bold vision statement, which, it's very few words on a slide. They do highlight the main point that it's not a privilege, it's a right. And that immediately is a narrative device that draws the potential audience in. But once we move to the next slide, Ben, if you could show that. Yeah, they unpack this bold statement with some very, very specific data points. They only have 5 on the slide, and they're all very specific to some specific problems that they're, B2B to C, the C within the B2B to C chain experience that really illustrate the company's vision from the outset. Then to another example. So speaking of, drawing people in by showing examples of something, of things that people are already aware of. So Superlist is this interesting tool that combines elements of a to-do list and a task management platform and a chat platform, et cetera, all in one. And it might be complex for people to understand how exactly this works. But I really urge you to have a look at this deck. It's a very beautiful deck from a narrative perspective. And they build out this narrative that shows how work has changed pre-COVID, during COVID, and how certain tools solve specific things within this new remote work environment. And this slide really brings all of it together, and they bring examples of Slack and Notion, and they show this empty space where their product is going to be slotted in within this whole ecosystem of products dedicated specifically for remote works and collaborative teams. What they do as well, and if we go to the next slide, they show how their team is uniquely suited to bring this to life. And they do it in a series of very short and snappy slides. They start off by showing that their team is uniquely suited and presenting them. And then they zoom in on individual spheres of experience that really provide the synergy to bring this product to life. So for the next deck that I just wanted to show you briefly, this is a very complex product that is specifically designed for a very narrow segment, which is financial planning and analytics. And what I love about this is that it makes a very impersonal industry feel very personal from the outset by presenting the founder's story. And it really attaches, this beautiful personality to the narrative, and it really ties it together through a common narrative thread. And this deck also employs the same principle of bringing 2 knowns to create this one unknown. And if we look at the next slide, they use this narrative device of, a spreadsheet meeting SAS, which basically are 2 things that would be familiar to their audience to kind of bring them all together. And then I think I had another one to show. Yeah, this one is specifically about, making a complex product accessible through a very unique point of view. So speech recognition, specifically for enterprise, is quite complex, and it's AI based, but instead of going into the nitty-gritty details of their technology, they really zoom in on what sets them apart. It's the fact that they're not industry incumbents, it's they're physicists who are coming in to solve this problem within many industries. And in order to bring their complex product to life, if we look at the next slide, they employ direct quotes from their target audience that really unpack the benefits of the product, and they have some stats in there that really make the benefits shine. But this, again, because this is direct speech, it doesn't overwhelm their audience with some technical information. They just, they present this as social proof and for them to unpack the benefits in their stead. So it's showing, not telling. So these are just some narrative devices that you can use to bring both your brand and your pitch to life and keep it accessible and engaging for your audience. And I'll pass it over back to Ben for the next part.
Yeah, so yeah, I think so. Certainly, some sort of things to think about when writing a pitch. I think what we always work with clients on as well is as Anna mentioned right at the beginning there. You know, one of those first examples was using the vision as a really clear sort of introduction to the business. And I think visions are a vital part of any business, but it can be difficult to sort of connect your brand and the vision with the first steps you take. So connecting the sort of what we want to achieve with what we actually do. And I think you know, if you do a simple Google search of sort of what is a brand or brand models, there's a million different ways to think about your brand and the foundations of that brand. So it's easy to get lost in the language vision statement, mission statement, purpose, the why, the what, the how. There are lots of different ways to think about it. But we always try and keep it simple. I think, you know, the vision and mission is the ultimate foundations of the brand. So the vision, essentially, the future you're working towards. What is your company going to do to change the world? Feels like a big statement, but it is. And I think if you look at any of the sort of biggest trillion dollar companies, they have a really clear vision about what they want to do and what they want, the value they want to sort of contribute to the world. But they also have a very clear mission to really the thing that your business does today that contributes value and sets the direction for how you reach the vision. And a lot of companies will have a vision, some will have a mission, they might have both, they might have one. But for us, you know, working these two things together is the opportunity to set the ambition and direction for the business and make it really clear to your team how we're going to do it. And I think whenever you look at vision and mission statements, they should be simple, they should be easy to understand, and touching on some of what Anna was talking about in terms of simple and straightforward language that doesn't complicate, it's not technical, that just emotionally connects to an audience need, is where vision and mission can play a really strong role. So I think it's important to think through a few core aspects that create vision and mission statements that last, are achievable, and your team clearly understands. So identifying your core focus, and we touched on it earlier about, you know, the business growing and expanding and having to change over time, particularly when you first start off. And so your vision and mission may evolve as you do, but be critical of yourself and the business, and try and be as single-minded as you can in identifying the world in which you operate. So, you know, really being clear about that core focus. What is your differentiator? You know, once you've got your focus, why is what you do different to anyone else? So being really clear and compelling, creating a really clear and compelling competitive advantage will help your business stand out. And particularly when thinking about vision, you know, what does the business look like in 5 to 10 years? It might be hard to think about when you're in the early stages or you're still developing a product. And of course, the world can change, but trying to imagine what that growth looks like, or what you want to help achieve. I think more recently we've been working with clients that creating visions that are not necessarily achievable goals anyway. So looking at something that you may never achieve, but it gives you a really clear focus, and it gives you something to sort of gravitate towards. And then when you think about the sort of space between what you do today, the mission, and where you want to reach the vision, you know, the vision might be far off, and what you do today is today. So therefore, think about what are the steps you're going to take? What are the nearer term targets, the short term goals, 1-2 year targets that you and your team can align around, so you can see how you're going to reach that vision. So I've got a few examples of how these things work together. So connecting the vision, where you want to get to, and what you do today through the mission. So Jura is a great example of, again, vision and missions that work really well together. So the vision to enable anyone anywhere to find the perfect vehicle for their next adventure. That's not necessarily a target for the brand to achieve. They don't sort of claim that, you know, we're going to enable 1 billion people to do it within the vision, because the vision is meant as that far out target, is meant as that thing to reach for. But the mission then grounds them. So to put the world's 1.5 billion cars to better use, grounds them in a really clear need, a really clear answer to what customers want and what the world needs. So the two working together work really strongly there. Benevolent AI is another good example where the vision and mission work together, but have different roles to play. So the vision really kind of focuses on the idea of a healthier world. the sort of thing that no one can argue against, which no disease goes untreated. So it's ambitious but grounded in their world, and then the mission really gets, really brings the focus in: unite AI with human expertise to discover new and more effective medicines. So each time you can see how you've set yourself a vision, and the mission is very clearly a way to reach that. And the final one that we want to bring up is TED. And I think, particular mission statement, I think it's super impactful, super clear, said in 2 words. But from a vision point of view, they're really focusing on their belief and, what they can do, what they can bring to the world. So we believe passionately in the power of ideas to change attitudes, lives, and ultimately the world. And the mission, it says so many things in 2 simple words that I think it's such a fantastic mission: spread ideas. Short, to the point, brings a really clear focus to their business. The fact that they give them opportunities to spread into new areas, so TED, TEDx, and expand their product. It gives them focus, but it gives anyone reading it or working with the company, they can derive their own meanings from it. And I think that's important as well, is that while you set yourself in your company a vision and mission, think about how other people are going to interpret it, particularly new hires in your team. Does it give them enough scope within that idea to see how they can contribute to it? So it's not just about the business, but the people that are involved with it as well. I'm going to hand back to Anna to sort of pick up on the last point here around, well, if you've done all this work around your brand and you've got the basics, you've got the foundations there, how do you know that what you've done is working?
Yeah, and it's this is a question that we get asked a lot, and it's a difficult one to answer, purely because there are brand metrics that long-established market intelligence agencies can measure, such as brand awareness, consideration, and preference. But if you're just starting out, these metrics are meaningless, because your target audience will have no recognition, no sentiments towards your brand, because quite simply they haven't heard of you yet. So you will need to get a little bit creative in understanding whether your branding efforts work or not. And the very first thing that you need to do when you're measuring your brand success and whether your brand is successful is really set your baseline. So try to understand exactly what it is you're trying to achieve through your branding. So you want to really zoom into, we want the audience to have a certain interpretation of us. We want our audience to view us a certain way compared to the competition. What exactly is this way that you want to be viewed? What positives and negatives do you want your audience to see in your brand? And what sentiments you want at each specific brand touch point to communicate. So once you have this understanding of what it is that you want to achieve through your branding, there are certain techniques that you can employ. So you can employ some technical tools. Unfortunately, quantitative data has its limitations when it comes to branding. Many metrics can point you in certain directions, but they'll never answer the elusive question of attribution. So if, for example, a person spends a lot of time on your website, or many people spend a lot of time on your website, is this because your brand is so compelling, or is it because they're confused and they're trying to figure out what's going on? But some metrics that are useful to look at when you're measuring brand engagement is, first of all, website engagement. So this includes things like the bounce rate, the time that they spend on site, and the pages that they view per visit. So the combination of these data, it tells you how much people actually engage with your content, and you can use widely available tools to measure these metrics, but also traffic sources and general website engagement. You can look at Google Analytics, you can use KISS metrics and tools like that. And then once you start building out your brand a little bit more broadly, you can start using social media listening tools to track mentions, and not only direct mentions, but just mentions of your brand name and discussions of your brand name in social media. These can help you identify influencers who have who have an impact on your business growth, and they can just show you what people are generally saying about your brand. But when you're just starting out, these tools perhaps are not going to be the most meaningful ones when you measure brand. Some other techniques are going to be very important, and that is specifically talking with the people who will ultimately be your brand audiences. And really, there are only three categories when you're starting out, and these are going to be your customers. So you can talk to them directly through interviews, you can launch a simple survey, and you really want, at this early stage, you really want to be direct and ask them what they think about your brand and your product. The second category of people that you want to talk to at an early stage would be your team, because employee alignment is crucial for branding success. So you want everyone on your team to really be on board with the mission and the vision that you set out for yourselves. And specifically, you want to interview and talk to those who work very closely to customers so that they can give you their perspective on how customers are perceiving your brand. And finally, you're going to have a lot of interesting conversations with investors. And when you pitch to investors, you typically want to highlight the strengths of your business model and explain why they should invest in your brand. If your branding isn't hitting the mark when you're talking to investors, this will come out when you pitch. And so those conversations are going to be very important in understanding whether your branding is hitting where it should be or it's missing the mark. But the important thing, at an early stage is to understand that building out a brand, it's not, a marketing campaign. It's not a direct response campaign where you can pour in some money and you can see clicks and downloads and see that it's working or not. With campaigns such as that, you can see whether it's effective or not, usually within the space of a few weeks. With branding, it takes a much longer time. Success in branding is measured in months or even years. For some, this may be a bitter pill to swallow, but it's important to start at an early stage to create this positive association between your brand and the customer's pain points, and how you are resolving these pain points and creating a better world for these specific customers. And just like any key metric within your company, your goal should be to measure it consistently throughout your progression, so that you have something to measure against, and you can see your progression and you can see how your brand is developing over time, so that you can have this understanding and you can make adjustments as you go along. So really, it's about identifying your metrics, starting small, and giving it quite a lot of time. That's it for me.
So, yeah, thank you. And that's it for both of us, I think. Yeah, hopefully that was interesting. I feel like you kind of got something out of it that sort of inspired you to think about branding and how to manage it, how to think about those foundations and the fundamentals behind it, and obviously some ways to build that into your pitch and think about how you hire and how you attract people and invest in a team and so on. So we'll stop there. But if there's any questions, then obviously happy to answer.
Yep, Ben, I do think we've got one question in the chat from Peter about, you mentioned building a brand with flexibility. Could you elaborate on that and sort of, the distinctions between a flexible and versus inflexible brand? And what do you incorporate or think about when building a more flexible brand?
Yeah, no, of course. So I think, the flexibility comes partly from, being open with the idea of what a brand is, and that concept of, the vision being something that you want as that long-term goal. But the mission is something that we always encourage people to think about and change as it needs to. What we also tend to do is within, when we're working on value propositions and sort of identifying that core sense of value, not just focusing on one. You know, I think if you sort of only build one clear value proposition, that A, doesn't necessarily cover every aspect of your business, B, it sort of ties you to one thing you want to do well. So we always try and build out value propositions to at least 2 or 3 that give you more flexible ways to talk about different aspects of the brand. So depending on the audience you're talking to, you might talk about one value proposition or another. And likewise, as we go through that process from starting very wide from the vision to the mission, everything is narrowing. So you're starting with that big aspirational element. As you go through to the mission, the value proposition, the positioning statement, you are narrowing your focus and being clear about the detail. And then when we get to messaging, which is what we sort of typically see as the second phase of that, you then start to think about the transition between all those elements that guide you as a business to then get communicated to your audience. And again, you know, because you've got different value propositions, you're able to create different ways to communicate value to your audience. So again, giving you the flexibility to talk about different aspects, encourage conversations about, you know, with your audience in different ways, so that, you know, we're not sort of we're not providing brands a checklist to walk through. We're providing them options of ways to communicate and ways to land the value. So the idea being that gives you that flexibility. And I think, you know, the difference between flexible versus inflexible brand, I think, is really comes down to the willingness of the team and the founders to not see brand as a hard and fast kind of point, but actually something that evolves as you do, and that reflects you as a team and a business as you move through those stages of growth. So that's, you know, as much as we can give you the tool to create flexibility, it's an inherent sort of belief that brand is not, it's not solid, it's not something that doesn't change. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you so much, Ben and Anna. Really appreciate your time today and sharing your expertise, and look forward to sharing these resources with our community. And if anybody wants to get in touch, we'll send them over to Wolf at wunderdogs.co. Yeah. And we got some gratitude from Peter there in the chat.